Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to that view, Sarah. I think the product is a leftover from the days when we had big, durable, paternalistic employers and jobs for life and all this kind of stuff, and proven from it. So I remember raising exactly this issue of the flexibility of DC versus PG schemes 20 years ago at a similar session of this. Some guys said, well, there are private sector employers that you can trust, like, for example, banks. Say water for glass. But I understand the point you make about difficulty about drawdown. I understand the point you make about the complexity of the product, the high fund management costs, and so on and so forth. There are lots of ways of trying to deal with that. One is to have a decent first pillar, which we kind of do in Ireland. I mean, our first pillar in Ireland is good and better than it is in the UK, where a road relative to earned income. Plus, there are other ways of saving for retirement. You can buy a house. That's a pretty good investment. They're cheaper now. And I know people, I know small business people who simply will not lock up their money in some flipping pension scheme. They'll reinvest in their own business. And nothing wrong with that. But you know, I'm not going to try and give a 5-point plan to save the pension system here. But I think that there has to be some mechanism for people with the intent to save for retirement, which permits them to be tax points. You know, you can't get taxed on the way in and taxed on the way out. The Irish system, funded and unfunded schemes are treated symmetrically. There's no imputation of contributions for unfunded schemes, and funded schemes get tax relief on the way in, and they're all taxed on the way out. So that system needs to be retained in some shape or form, or there will not be private sector funded schemes.
Okay, we'll take another question. We only have 5 minutes left in the session, so if you keep the question short, the questions certainly have been short, and I will get Colm maybe to keep the answers a little short as well, so we can get as many questions in.
It's not really a question, just a quick comment. The remark about British Airways reminds me of you can define General Motors as a company that has a large medical insurance system which makes a few cars on the side. To some extent, I think the American problem of providing medical benefits is a bit similar to the problem to find benefit systems here.
So do you want to keep responding?
Yeah, it is, and it has the features of a potential Ponzi scheme as well, in the sense that if your firm is new and you've got lots of young members, you don't have lots of medical bills. So there is this potential Ponzi scheme thing built into it, as there is into the defined benefit pension.
Okay, another question? Okay, again in the back.
Hi, Pat Ryan here. Just in terms, Colm, just to develop your point about the clubs in the bag, I think you only mentioned 13 of them, because in fact, I think the state, why does the state not just sell annuities to people at the correct price? I mean, if it sell it on the yield basis on which they're borrowing money in other ways, and taking proper up-to-date account of longevity payments and so forth. And in fact, in this situation, it would involve, in fact, repatriation funds that are currently being invested outside the country. And the cash flow benefits to the state are very considerable, as well as giving people, removing again the veil that you mentioned with the carrots, that it lets people know, if I'm opting to retire at 70, the annuity I can buy now is X amount per annum for this amount of money. If I opt to retire at 72, it's a different figure, it's a better figure. So it removes all that veil. And there's a big benefit to the state, the cash flow.
Yeah, I mean, governments could could set up a company and flog real annuities themselves, or they could flog the bonds and let the market complete. Annuity markets have been very competitive in recent times. In fact, annuity providing companies have, on average, lost money, I think, in the UK in recent times. And that puts longevity risk. I mean, Sarah's question, I think, was hinting at the problems with both investment risk and longevity risk that the person is exposed to. You can't eliminate risk, but you can mitigate. You can't make it vanish. You can certainly mitigate some of the investment risk, at least, by directing people into index-linked government securities. And at the other end, you can get them to convert their pensions on retirement into real annuities. And I think that addresses not all, but some of the problems that Colm designed that we're talking about. But I don't think government has to write the annuities itself. It can just flog the full spectrum of bonds at different durations and let the markets go off and synthesize the annuities.
Okay, I think we have time for just one more question, so you're the front.
Joanne Spain. There was 2.9 billion given out in private pension tax reliefs last year at the standard management rate, which is quite a low rate. So a lot of those pension funds would have diminished or collapsed completely. Is there scope to just grow more carrots, increase PRSI, stop giving out private pension tax reliefs, and increase the benefits of the first pillar?
Of the
first pillar, the state's pension.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think we need to be careful about what's a tax relief and what isn't. You know, if you think of the accumulation of retirement saving in funded schemes as consumption smoothing over the lifetime, and that's the way it's easiest to look at it, you can only tax it once. You can't tax it on the way in and on the way out, and there won't be any funded pension provision. And what we have traditionally done here, perhaps a bit loose with some of the rules, but what we've done here is we've said it doesn't matter whether it's funded or unfunded. There is no imputation for unfunded pensions, which means the Occupation Public Service scheme, and there's no tax on the contributions to funded ones. Now that's symmetric and it's neutral, and if you start monkeying around with it, you get into potential avoidance difficulties. To describe the 2.9 billion, I've seen these calculations, the pension funds report and so on, as a tax relief. I mean, unless you believe that there should be no tax relief for pensions in accumulation, which is a point of view you're hinting at, logically you must then believe there should be no tax on pensions in payment. If you believe there should be tax on both occasions, then you believe that there should be no funding of pensions. And that's a feasible scheme too, but be clear that that's what you're driving at. So these are not tax reliefs in the sense in which they're normally understood. And I think Patrick got this society meeting there last in January. You were raising questions about what is the correct way to compute the tax advantage that is being conferred on these, you know. So it's a minefield. Expect a very long chapter in the Commission on Taxation on this issue. Okay.
Great, thank you very much, Colm. That was